Good morning and evening, participants. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the US Embassy webinar series. So this session featuring a session on cyber titled Finding Cyber Stability Amidst Shifting Landscapes. Thank you very much for joining us in this series that in previous months brought great thinkers from the United States and Malaysia for conversations on policy, strategy, and security issues. To begin this morning's program, I would like to invite Mr. Michael Marcus, Economic Officer, US Embassy in Malaysia, to deliver the welcoming remarks.
Good morning, Farlina, and thank you so much for the welcome. Good morning to and good evening to everyone who's joining us for this excellent talk, what will be a great discussion on a very important topic, the Foreign Policy Speaker Series, and a big thank you as well to ISIS Malaysia for working with us to put on this great discussion. I also want to thank our expert speakers, Harry Mortos from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency at the Department of Homeland Security in the United States, and Azleyna Ariffin from the National Cybersecurity Agency of Malaysia. Cybersecurity is a top foreign policy and domestic priority for the Biden administration back in the United States. Harry will share more about the executive order that was introduced by President Biden back in May that touches on a number of important developments in terms of how the United States responds to cybersecurity threats and how we protect our interests in the future. As we move towards a digital world, cybersecurity considerations are paramount to protecting the functioning of government and the livelihoods of our citizens. Malaysia has adopted a number of strategies to move toward this digital future, and cybersecurity really needs to be considered hand in hand with that change. With cybersecurity, you're only as strong as your weakest link, literally. But the good news is that there's a lot we can gain from working together, the United States and Malaysia, and learning from each other, seeing what we're doing and adopting some of those best practices. A little bit about the administration and what they're doing regarding cybersecurity. The Biden administration has funded 5 cybersecurity modernization efforts across the federal government to modernize network defenses to meet the threat. This includes state-of-the-art endpoint security, improving logging practices, moving to a secure cloud environment, upgrading security operations centers, and deploying multi-factor authentication and encryption technologies. The administration is also implementing the executive order, which, as I mentioned, we have an expert here to tell us more about. This executive order contains aggressive but achievable implementation milestones And to date, we've met every milestone on our timeline, including the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, or NIST, has convened a workshop with almost 1,000 participants from industry, academia, and government to obtain input on best practices for building secure software. NIST has also issued guidelines for the minimum standards that should be used by vendors to test the security of their software. This shows how we can leverage federal procurement to improve the security of software, not only used by the federal government, but also by our companies, state and local governments, and individuals. The National Telecommunications and Information Administration in the United States has also published minimum elements for a software bill of materials, which is a first step to improving transparency of software used by the American public. We're very, very proud and grateful for CISA and Harry to join us today, for Naxa and Azleyna, and we're grateful to our moderating team. I'll turn it over to you, Farlina, and wish everyone an excellent and productive discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marcus, for the welcoming remarks and also for setting the grounds and sharing with us the efforts of the Biden administration in this space. I think many can actually agree that government modernization is actually one part, or a core crucial part when it comes to cybersecurity, as the government actually will handle a lot of information that's sensitive when it comes to the people's data. So, and also we do look forward to greater detail from Mr. Harry later on. Moving on to the forum itself. So some of you may wonder why the usage of cyber stability instead of cybersecurity. The title would indicate that security in cyberspace has reached beyond traditional IT system-based approaches in an environment where the assumption is that systems are being attacked consistently, where we actually have a NetScout Global Threat Intelligence report saying that there are 4.83 million DDoS attacks in the first half of 2020. That translates to roughly around 26,000 attacks a day, or 18 attacks per minute. Thus, if once security is thought to be the absence of attacks, today's environment will focus on building resilience, which is where it would be preparations for attacks to occur, mitigating such attacks if systems are affected, and ensuring the recovery of systems and service is possible. In addition, while conversations of cybersecurity can be technical, the idea of cyber stability can widen the conversation to other factors impacting security in and through cyberspace, which would also include advances in cyber operations and strategy, the development of law and legal instruments to build responsible state behavior, and the different stakeholders needed to ensure the cyberspace is secured, which actually looks at your supply chain and the vendors and the systems that would actually be needed for your vendors to also have high cybersecurity practices. Perhaps the timeliness of this forum is in the right moment, as in May this year, US President Biden signed an executive order on improving the nation's cybersecurity. On the Malaysian front, the launch of the Malaysia Cybersecurity Strategy and update of the National Cybersecurity Policy aims to move Malaysia's process to build the nation's cybersecurity forward. With me today are two distinguished speakers to share further their thoughts on policy, cyber stability, and shifting landscapes. We have Ms. Azleyna Ariffin. Ms. Azleyna is the Principal Assistant Director of Cyber Integration Legal Division, National Cybersecurity Agency. Her division is responsible to develop and implement strategic action plans that enhance Malaysia's cyber laws to address current and emerging threats and to enhance the capacity and capability of cybercrime enforcement. Prior to this, Ms. Azleyna was Deputy Director of Network Security Management Department at the Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission, where she was responsible for overseeing the information security management, standard assessment, and standards development for the communication and multimedia industry. Ms. Azleyna is also currently chairman for the Malaysia Working Group on Information Security Management Systems. That is a mirror committee to the International ISO IEC Working Group Committee. We also have Mr. Harry Motos. Mr. Motos is an IT Information Security Specialist at the Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Previously, he was with the National Cybersecurity Assessments and Technical Services team. He now serves as an advisor to the Executive Assistant Director for Cybersecurity at CISA. Just letting you know, we will be most pleased to have questions from the floor. And if it will be possible, we do invite our participants to share their questions in the Q&A function instead of the chat function. If it is all right, do allow me to invite Ms. Azleyna Ariffin to take the floor. Ms. Azleyna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Farlina. Good morning, good afternoon, and maybe good evening to few of you. Thank you again to each participant for spending your valuable time with us today. I'm pleased to be able to join the session today. Thank you, ISIS Malaysia, and also I'm pleased to share the National Cybersecurity Agency of Malaysia, or we also known as NACSA, on the topic today. I will set the setting of my presentation with brief information about who we are, NACSA, followed by our journey in developing the national strategy, and finally a brief introduction of the strategy itself, and on how Malaysia steps or action plan to ensure the cyber stability amidst shifting landscape basically. So next slide please. Okay, the National Cybersecurity Agency was officially established in February 2017 as the national lead agency for cybersecurity matters, with the objective of securing and strengthening the Malaysia resilience in facing the threats of cyber attacks by doing coordination and also consolidating the nation best expert and also resources in the field of cybersecurity. We are committed to develop and also implement the national level cybersecurity policy and also strategy to protect our critical national information infrastructure, undertake the strategic measures in countering the threats, spearheading the cybersecurity awareness, acculturation programs, and also capacity building programs. We are also responsible to formulate strategic approach towards combating cybercrime, in which the division I am in at the moment, and also develop and also optimizing shared resources among agencies to foster a constructive regional and also global networks among entities with the same interest in cybersecurity. Truly, whether we like it or not, or we can say that it is a known fact that in transforming or even establish a government policy on cybersecurity will always be an interesting journey actually. Acknowledging the growth of cyber threats that are endangering the sovereignty of the nation, a cybersecurity policy was put in place. So the National Cybersecurity Policy, or we call it as a NCSP, to ensure that the CNNI is protected to a level that commensurate the risk faced basically. In a constantly changing cyber threats environment, like other countries' policy or strategy, it needs to be flexible and dynamic cybersecurity strategy to meet new, emerging, and also global threats basically. In line with the global development and also the increasing use of ICT technologies, we see that the existing NCSP framework established prior is no longer able to address the risk of current cybersecurity threats comprehensively. So what do? We look at the lesson learned and also area of improvement from the implementation of NCSP. And we also look at how we perform for the Global Cybersecurity Index, GCI, which is by the ITU. Understand where our strengths are and what would be the weaknesses that we need to improve basically. Okay, next slide please. Okay, so we did engagement with 148 agencies, public and private sectors, all the stakeholders, because we want to have this inclusivity from every stakeholder to ensure the successful implementation of the new policy or strategy that we want to come up at that time. We want to build the strategic relationship to improve the cybersecurity as a nation, not as individual. In addition to brainstorming session with the ministries, agency, and also the industry, the development of MCSS also takes into account the cybersecurity best practices from foreign countries, such as the United Kingdom, the United States, Australia, Japan, and also Singapore. Next slide, please. Okay, all right. And at the same time, we also look at needs, the guidance on approaches to be implemented by country in managing aspect of national cybersecurity. So we look this as one of the reference also during the development of a new strategy. Views, feedback obtained from counterparts through meeting, conferences, seminars, and discussion sessions were also put into input to the development of the MCSS basically. Next slide, please. So our dependency on cyberspace has increasingly significantly, especially during this pandemic situation. Threats, risks, and also vulnerabilities stemming from this domain also has multiplied some way somehow. And to support the government commitment to ensure a safe and secure cyberspace by enhancing our cybersecurity capabilities on all fronts, the Malaysian Cybersecurity Strategy, also known as the MCSS, officially launched on 12 October 2020. The MCSS also focused on the three overriding success factors for interrelated and also interdependent organizational change, which is people, process, and also technology. Next slide, please. The MCSS has its very own vision and mission as stated in the slides. The MCSS consists of 12 strategies, 35 action plans, and also 113 programs, contains various initiatives to serve as safeguard for the nation's cyberspace. In essence, there are 5 foundations to this particular strategy. It will be replacing the existing National Cybersecurity Policy, or the NCSP, as I mentioned just now, as it is developed to be more inclusive, comprehensive, covering the protection of the critical national information infrastructure, businesses, small and medium enterprises, industry, and ultimately the citizens. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the 5 strategic pillars as I mentioned just now. Next one. Okay, so who are the people that need to involve with the implementation of this particular strategy? It's everyone. It's a whole nation approach actually. So this is where we embark everybody during the development of the strategy so that people understand where they can contribute in terms of the implementation of the strategy to ensure that the cybersecurity of the nation is being protected. All right, next slide. So the first pillar for the strategy is effective governance and also management. So first, to enhance the governance of the management of the country's cybersecurity, we have already established the Malaysia Cybersecurity Committee, whereby this committee is being chaired by the appointed minister to handle cybersecurity matters for Malaysia basically. And there are other strategy also under this particular pillar that we want to achieve. Like say for example, we also would like to improve the organization management and also business operation by embarking everybody on the same journey with us related to cybersecurity. And also we want to strengthen the cybersecurity incident, whereby one of the activity that we're going to do is actually enhancing the capacity of the national cyber incident management basically. Next slide. Okay, so again, as I mentioned just now, it's about everybody. So NACSA or the National Cybersecurity Agency will look at the policy coordination, policy governance, and so on. Then we have the critical national information infrastructure, the sector lead, and also the organization that we want to protect. Right, and then inclusive of the SME, and then the cybercrime matters by all the relevant law enforcement agency, and who are the people that we will also want to embark to provide the awareness session and also the acculturation, the education, syllabus on cybersecurity and so on. And then for the capacity building, how do we want to reskill them? How do we want to upskill them in terms of the cybersecurity? And then we look at the international cooperation, whereby we already have the existing platform that has been managed by all the ministry or agency in Malaysia. And last but not least is actually about the national security and also sovereignty basically. Next slide. And pillar number 2 is about how we want to strengthen the existing laws and regulation in Malaysia, as well as the law enforcement agency with regards to the cybercrime. So it may involve how we want to do some sort of capacity and also capability training to our law enforcement to manage the cybercrime. And also we need to maybe we need to review some of the existing laws in Malaysia, and also coming up maybe with a new law. So the one that we're looking at the moment is actually the Cybersecurity Act. Next. The third pillar talking about we want to spur the National Cyber Security R&D program. We want to promote the creation of local technology and also competitive local industry, basically. So this is to empower a world-class innovation and also technology cyberspace, research and development by the local industries. Next one. Fourth is about we want to enhance the capacity and also capability of experts besides promoting awareness on cybersecurity in the community. This include coming up with the National Cybersecurity Awareness Master Plan, coming up with the cybersecurity education, a uniform one, coming up with the adequate tools and also technology that can be used by our students or even by our local workforce actually to upscale and also rescale their knowledge in cybersecurity. Next one. Last but not least is actually about strengthening the international cooperation to combat cyber threats. That would be in terms of to demonstrate our commitment in promoting a secure, stable and peaceful cyberspace, to hold the international security, to shape a concerted national position on norms, rules and principles of responsible behavior of states, and also how international law applies in the cyberspace. Next slide. Okay. Unfortunately, no country in the world can deal with cybersecurity issues alone. So again, international cooperation is very crucial in overcoming these challenges. The digital transformation of the nation, Malaysia, can be described as a journey. There is a path that we need to take. There is a destination that we want to reach, and a unique needs that we need to address or meet along the way. So let's say, for example, Malaysia wanted to go for, IR4 industry, 5G implementation, digital economy, e-commerce, digital identity, and so on. So we need to ensure that there is a trusted and also secured environment for the implementation of all these new initiatives. Has to be implemented with security by design. We also need to ensure in terms of the supply chain security, and we also need to ensure that comprehensive security measures are being put in place. All right. So the government of Malaysia also has launched the My Digital Agenda and the Malaysia Digital Economy Blueprint on 19 February 2021 to ensure Malaysia to be in the right trajectory by 2030 by driving digital transformation, basically. Aim at encouraging all Malaysia to embrace digitalization and also seize opportunity to improve the standard of living. My Digital is a national initiative. Indirectly, it symbolizes the aspiration of the government to successfully transform Malaysia into a digitally driven, high-income nation and also regional leader in digital economy. Definitely, the digital transformation of Malaysia will be an exciting journey because rapid digital transformation shift cybersecurity priorities. Cybersecurity postures may need to be updated and also adjusted to deal with increased complexity. Having a robust cybersecurity strategy in place is actually half job done. Strong execution capabilities is equally important to successfully drive the nation into digitalization and also protect businesses or even the nation against cyber attacks. Next, please. So this slide is actually, I want to share a few of our ongoing strategy initiatives at the national level actually, that are currently in our pipeline, using the 5 pillars as the guiding principle in ensuring we're able to find the cyber stability amid shifting landscape, basically, besides launching of the strategy itself. So for pillar number 1, specific to the protection of the cyberspace, we are enhancing the National Cyber Coordination and Command Center, also known as NC4 prior to this, in which, accordance to the latest approved National Security Council Directive number 26, NC4 will also be known as the National CERT, with the intention of strengthening of the monitoring and also the ability to predict, detect, prevent, and also respond to cyber threats comprehensively and also holistically. So in pillar number 2, we are currently doing the feasibility studies of having a cybersecurity bill of our own, Malaysia very own cybersecurity bill. And we also want to establish a cyber integrated management system to strengthen the cybercrime enforcement capacity and capability in doing investigation of cybercrime, to increase the number of prosecutions and successful prosecution basically, and also how that they can have more capability and also capacity with regards to cybercrime committed by the organized syndicates actually. Okay, so for pillar number 3, few ongoing programs at the moment we are having with the Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation, or MDEC. One of the program we call it as the Cyber 100, whereby for the next 5 years, I think for the next 4 years actually, we want to produce 100 local cyber security solution basically. So we are encouraging all of those local cyber security solution companies, technology provider to also embark in this program because it is for the nation, yeah. And then we also have come up with a program we call as a matrix, whereby this is specifically for the small and medium enterprises for them to embark on cybersecurity measures, which is it is very easy to adopt and also readily available solutions basically. And for pillar number 4, it's about for us to establish the National Cyber Security Awareness Master Plan together with the other agency in Malaysia basically to ensure there is a national concerted effort for the program, which is the awareness, and to ensure that we can maximize the resources and also reach more target groups actually. We don't want to reinvent a new wheel. We will embark on the existing plans that are already there that may be being conducted by some of the ministry or agencies in Malaysia, but we want to ensure that it is outlined in this particular master plan so we can achieve a national concerted effort. And for number 5 is about continuing our strengthening effort in bilateral cooperation on cybersecurity matters to actively do participation and also contribution in the key international fora basically. Yes. I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you. Back to you, Farlina.
Thank you so much, and thank you very much for actually walking us through the ideas or the thought processes behind our Malaysian cybersecurity strategy that was actually launched like last year. And there was a lot of I think there's a lot of areas that I think we would actually like to learn more, and I think most likely, I would actually be curious about because inside the cybersecurity strategy, there are also things like the International Engagement Plan, our National Cybercrime Enforcement Plan, and also, as you mentioned, about the Cybersecurity Act that's actually about the that you've actually already explained. And I think it would be great to actually just learn, I guess, a little bit more about all these other processes that are actually in place. But before that, if it's okay, I would actually just pass the floor to Mr. Harry Motors, just to get his thoughts on the subject matter. So thank you so much.
Most welcome.
Hey, good evening. First, thank you for having me. It is very exciting to hear, and one of the things that really stuck out to me was the emphasis on education and training, on reskilling and upskilling the workforce, because that is such a critical problem worldwide. The shortage of talented, trained cybersecurity professionals is really a risk all over the world. Here in the United States, CoreSeek.org, I believe there's over 450,000 vacant cybersecurity jobs across the country, and it is problematic, and their concerted efforts to build that cybersecurity workforce are a net positive for everybody. Actually, as an aside, I used to run the President's Cup cybersecurity competition for CISA, where we focused on identifying, challenging, and rewarding the best cyber talent in the federal government, but it was always a key tenet to our program to provide everything that we produce to the community as an open source resource. So all of our challenges from previous competitions are all up on GitHub as a resource for building training and education. All right, so I guess without further ado, if there are no objections, I'll go ahead and jump into it. Thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Harry Mortos. I am serving as an advisor to the Executive Assistant Director for Cybersecurity at CISA, where I have been responsible for the Cybersecurity Division's response to the Executive Order 14028. So for those who are not familiar, I'll go ahead and drop a link in the chat to a website on whitehouse.gov. That link will take you to a copy of the order if you're interested, or you can Google Executive Order 14028 and it'll come right up. So this executive order, formally titled On Improving the Nation's Cybersecurity, has been colloquially referred to as the Cyber EO because it is expansive, it is all-encompassing for cybersecurity and how we're really seeking to change the landscape and improve our federal and national cyber posture through the actions as defined in the order. There are 10 sections. CISA is mentioned, I believe, just under 30 times. We have been either leading, consulting, or acting on, I believe, 30 different tasks across the executive order. It's been a whirlwind effort. The timelines, as was previously mentioned, were certainly ambitious. They were doable, but very ambitious, and we had worked pretty hard, especially in the early days of the executive order, to meet the needs. As an example, our first deadline was 14 days from signing of the order. CISA was tasked with providing logging recommendations for the entire federal government. What types of logs should be collected, for how long they should be stored, access procedures, how to maintain integrity of those logs. It was quite the undertaking. We provided our recommendations to the Office of Management and Budget, and we're continuing to work with them on putting a policy memo out that will codify this requirement to the federal government. Let me step back real quick. Our role as CISA, as the nation's risk advisor, put us in a really unique place across the executive order to not just lead the development of some of these more technical tasks, but also to assist our interagency or interagency partners with their responsibilities as well, working very closely with the good people at NIST, as was mentioned in the previous presentation. It's been a very unique experience. This is such a unique time, especially in the aftermath of SolarWinds, in the aftermath of the Microsoft Exchange publicly disclosed vulnerability. It feels like for the past 6 months, every time you turn around, there's a new disclosure, there's a new, there is something new. So no one in this field is certainly bored, but this executive order just highlights how important it is to the administration and to and in order to implement some of these security-based controls and getting some of these products out to the federal government as quickly as possible, so that we can start reaping the benefits of the work. To date, we just passed our 90-day deadline in the executive order as of August 9th, and we are 100% on delivering all of our asks from CISA. There were a number of them. We'll go through the EO section by section and talk a little bit more about what it entails. But it has been very, very fruitful to work and see these products come together that are really going to make an impact in federal and national cybersecurity. So we'll start with section 2. Section 1 is a policy statement on behalf of the administration about the importance of cybersecurity and why this executive order is so important. Section 2 is where we start getting into some of the deliverables, and Section 2 covers removing barriers to sharing threat information. So this work in Section 2 was primarily about recommendations to the Federal Acquisition Regulation Council, really trying to, one, leverage better information sharing with government contractors in order to make sure that incident reporting, indicators of compromise, and other information that's critical in the response to a massive cyber incident, that there are no barriers to sharing that information, so that contractors can provide that information to their contracted agency. They can provide it to CISA, and we as CISA can take that reporting and work with our interagency partners to lead a coordinated response. There are also elements of Section 2 that get at basic cybersecurity hygiene practices and standardized contract language, the federal government, to standardize some of those best practices in cybersecurity, to really raise the baseline and try and influence some good practices on that side of the fence. With the FAR Council process, DHS provided the recommendations to OMB and to the FAR Council. There were also other sections that were led by the Office of Management and Budget where they provided their recommendations. Now the FAR Council has a deliberative process where they go through open comment. So our recommendations will be a part of that open comment to the best of our knowledge, and will be out there for the public. Moving on to Section 3. Section 3 revolves around modernizing federal government cybersecurity. So really here, the end goal, all of these efforts are really to raise the cybersecurity posture of the federal government. CISA and OMB worked very closely together, providing resources, providing guidance to the agencies. Section 3C, I believe, covers a cloud security technical reference architecture, a cloud governance framework, and a cloud zero trust security strategy from OMB. This was really interesting to pull together. The cloud is inevitable. It feels like at this point, everybody is incorporating the cloud into their day-to-day IT practices. So from our perspective at CISA, and fortunate to have the opportunity in the executive order to do this work, to provide these resources out to our interagency colleagues, which will hopefully ease their transitions into the cloud in a secure manner, using best practices, using an architecture that we have designed for security in mind, as well as a governance framework that's based approach that will help inform some of the decision-making process across the interagency. An OMB was responsible for a zero trust and cloud security strategy, which we work very closely with them on. So the three of those pieces all together, we think will really pull that together. One of the things that I do want to mention is that it's very important to us that, especially a lot of these resources that we're building, being able to provide them to the community, so that the benefits of the activities in the executive order go beyond just the federal government. So we are planning to release the technical reference architecture for cloud security for a public comment period at some point in the future. So we're excited about that. That technical reference architecture in and of itself will certainly it will decrease cyber breaches across the federal network. The use of modern tools, appropriate cloud configurations, and cloud security best practices are really going to strengthen the government's defenses and reduce the amount of resources spent on incident response and recovery, trying to put in the work up front to ensure that we're paying for it less in the long run, so to speak. We also, with the cloud security work, we also put together a cloud incident response collaboration plan that will ensure that as CISA is responding to major incidents, we're able to share information with cloud service providers, and they can provide information with us to respond to federal incidents. This is actually part of a new effort out of CISA. We established recently, it was announced formally, Black Hat Cybersecurity Conference in August, the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, which is this group that is coming together to bring private and public interests together to be able to collaborate on cybersecurity strategy in the touch points between public and private sector and for the nation beyond just the federal government. So we're certainly excited for that work, and they're continuing their collaboration with cloud service providers to pull that together. The executive order also mandated for federal departments and agencies to implement to the greatest extent possible multi-factor authentication and encryption of data at rest, which is really important here, this implementation. They're responsible with providing reporting to CISA every 60 days, I believe, at which point we then analyze the data that we're receiving, and we are tasked with taking appropriate measures to maximize the implementation across the FSET. So with that, we're continuing to work with our interagency partners as they're implementing multi-factor authentication, encryption of data at rest, the cloud security technical reference architecture, the cloud and zero trust strategy from OMB will hopefully help our interagency colleagues as they move towards that goal. All right, so section 4 is the software supply chain security section of the EO. There are a wide variety of tasks. There's a lot here that's led by our colleagues at Department of Commerce and the National Institute for Science and Technology, for Standards and Technologies, including standards for testing software security, recommendations on secure software development practices, a host of issues. One of the ones where CISA was most involved was the critical software piece. NIST was tasked in working with CISA to create a definition for critical software, which is published on the NIST website. In addition to critical software categories that may exist across the federal government, we worked with NIST on those recommendations and some of the follow-on actions that CISA was tasked with to identify types of critical software that's in use in the federal government and implementing security controls around critical software. So section 5 is the Cyber Safety Review Board. So per the executive order, DHS is to stand up a cyber safety review board to review and assess significant cyber incidents as defined by Presidential Policy Directive 41. So this is a review board incidents that reach a certain threshold to be classified as a significant. For comparison, something that would affect the entire federal civilian executive branch, or more than just like a minor security incident where somebody may be, a limited breach at an agency or a minor security incident. So this is really for those major events where there's broad impact. CISA is supporting the efforts of our parent department, the Department of Homeland Security, to establish a charter and pull this board together. The initial review for the board, as outlined in the executive order, is to review the SolarWinds incident from earlier this year. And that board is it's going to be very it's a great opportunity to work with public and private partners to identify and make recommendations that will ultimately go up to the National Security Council and to the president on improving cybersecurity. We believe it to be very impactful. Section 6 is the federal government's playbook for vulnerability and incident response. So one of the things that we aim to do here is to provide a standardized set of actions across federal civilian executive branch departments and agencies, keeping in mind one of the unique aspects of federal cybersecurity is that each department and agency at varying levels have their own networks and their own network response and their own network. It's not really one federal enterprise. It's many smaller enterprises that all come together into the federal civilian executive branch. So with the playbook, the goal is to define and standardize the actions that are going to minimize exploiting vulnerabilities and to strengthen the cybersecurity to prevent adversary activity. So how the departments and agencies should respond to vulnerabilities that are in the wild, that are known to be exploited, how quickly they should patch, et cetera. One of the other main goals that we have here is to create one lexicon across the federal civilian executive branch for incident response and vulnerability management activities. Just making sure that we're all speaking the same language as we're talking about the various steps of incident response, such as remediation and mitigation, is going to be very helpful in the future as we work through potentially future cybersecurity incidents across the federal civilian executive branch. We leveraged lessons learned from recent federal cybersecurity incidents and recent vulnerability disclosures to really inform our approach and make sure that what we were putting together is going to have the maximum impact that it can. This is another one that potentially looking at releasing publicly. We think that there's a lot of value in providing something like this to help shape national and international standards for incident response and creating that that standardized lexicon across the industry. So Section 7 is our endpoint detection and response and continuous diagnostics and mitigation section. So this covers a few existing programs and a few new programs at CISA, and this is really tailored specifically to us. The goal here is to eliminate blind spots in CISA's visibility across the FCEB, be able to enable early detection of cybersecurity vulnerabilities and incidents across the federal civilian executive branch. There was new activities outlined in the fiscal year 21 National Defense Authorization Act that enabled CISA to take on a more proactive capability across the federal enterprise to allow us to go and proactively search for adversary activity, which is going to be a very unique capability to have. It's going to take some time to implement. The other tasks in Section 7 of the EO all work to enable that. One of which is the continuous diagnostics and mitigation program. The agreements that are in place across our federal civilian executive branch partners, they all needed to be updated to allow for object level detection to be able to get that visibility that an endpoint detection response capability would allow. So with endpoint detection and response, there are various commercial solutions out there that already meet this need for private industry. Implementing something across the federal civilian executive branch that CISA would be able to utilize the data from those endpoints would be extremely valuable. CISA was tasked with providing a plan to the Office of Management and Budget with options for how the federal government could roll out this capability and get CISA access to the data. OMB's policy memo based on our recommendations is forthcoming. So I can't get into too many details about what our recommendations look like or what a potential solution would be in respect to our colleagues at OMB. Don't want to get out ahead of their memo and steal their thunder. Section 8, the federal government's investigative and remediation capabilities. So this was the item that was touched on very early on regarding logging recommendations. We had 14 days to turn around and provide logging recommendations to the Office of Management and Budget to define how the federal government manage its logs. And the reason why this is so critical is when responding to an incident, the only way that you know what happened, one of the primary ways that you know what happened is through log analysis and looking at the data in the logs that are produced by your endpoint computers, by your networking equipment, by anything that produces logs. really enhances the visibility of the incident responders as they're taking on that investigative role and really trying to put the pieces together to identify who took action, when did they take it, what was the end result. Having those logs is really critical to that function. This is another one where we provided recommendations to OMB, where OMB is putting forth a policy memo in the near future. So as far as the specific recommendations, I can't get too into it. Although I will say that this is another one where we're very eager to make portions of our recommendations in partnership with the Office of Management and Budget, make it available to the world as an open source resource to inform decision making beyond just the federal government for what logs are really important to keep, how long should we keep them. We think that this could potentially start a very valuable conversation that could potentially serve to later assist our colleagues at NIST in updating their special publication 897 that covers log management best practices. So we're standing by, continuing to work with OMB. Very excited to provide that as a resource to the community in the coming months. Section 9 of the executive order focuses on national security systems. These systems are a little bit different than we talked about in the past. A lot of these efforts were led out of our colleagues at the Department of Defense and the National Security Agency. So I can't get too into those subjects here. And then section 10, of course, is a series of definitions that support the executive order. That's a rundown of the executive order. We've met 100% of our deadlines, provided all of the things that the administration had asked us to provide, continue to support not just producing the new documentation and artifacts that are coming due in the coming weeks and months, but also supporting initiatives that are coming out of the previous deliverables, such as expanding the FSEB footprint, or expanding the endpoint detection response footprint, and other activities to really support raising the federal and national cybersecurity posture. It's been a privilege to work on this impactful effort directed by the White House and certainly led in parts by CISA. And once again, I just want to take a moment and thank the hosts and organizers for inviting me to come speak. We're very passionate about this work that we're doing and the impact that it can have. And it's a great opportunity to come out and talk to everyone about it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mortos, for sharing that and for letting us, for actually walking us through the whole process of the EO. It is actually very interesting to actually note about the focus on the intra-agency as well as public-private partnerships that is actually in the EO, and actually how technical it is to a certain extent to actually manage the different aspects of the household to actually ensure that it's actually in order. So I actually do have a minor question for you. What were the technological advances and threat perceptions that shaped the approaches of the EO, and what are the challenges in your view is actually in implementing some of these programs? So if you wouldn't mind answering that first, I would actually go to Ms. Azleyna Ariffin with what I actually left her earlier in regards to some of the programs that we were actually looking at when we were actually walking through the National Cybersecurity Strategy. If it's all, yeah, I'll go to Ms. Azleyna first while you actually have a think over the question.
Okay, all right, sure. So just now you were talking about the proposed cybersecurity bills, basically. So we are studying in terms of feasibility of having a cybersecurity bill that whereby this is an act to require or authorize the taking of measures to prevent, manage, and also respond to cybersecurity threats and also incident, and how the bill will provide some sort of ways for us actually to regulate owners of critical national information infrastructure related to cybersecurity, to establish a formal framework and a working framework actually for sharing of information on cybersecurity. Provide us with a way actually to regulate cybersecurity service providers, and also to provide for matters connected and also accidental related to cybersecurity bill actually, Farlina. So these are the elements in our feasibility studies. Together with a few experts in Malaysia, we are also making reference to other established cybersecurity bills, including from our neighboring country like Singapore, from the US itself also. So we are looking at how best that we can come up with our very own cybersecurity bills that fit our very own environment, basically.
I think that is actually very handy, considering we do understand that since MCO, the number of cybersecurity threats have actually, the incidences have actually just increased, and then you actually find that there are different types of attacks actually occurring to a certain extent. I was actually about to ask whether this would actually be in any way related to the data protection, or it would actually be completely separate. I think just to get a bit of explanation or background how the Cybersecurity Act would actually be different from any data protection bills that would actually occur.
Okay. The proposed cybersecurity bill also will look in terms of the internationally known or practice standards related to matters in cybersecurity, including for privacy, which is the data protection. That may be one of the clauses actually for us to regulate the critical national information infrastructure to also adopt these internationally recognized standards or practices on protection of data actually, to ensure that we have the trust elements in handling matters related to cyber, basically.
All right, that's actually very, very good for us to actually know the trajectory of the cybersecurity bill.
Because basically works has been done with many internationally known standard development like ISO itself. So maybe as a Malaysia, if we see that the standard is fit for the purpose of us to ensure the security of data, so that will be something that we will ask the critical national information infrastructure to adopt via the requirements in this particular proposed bill, basically.
Okay. But from my understanding, then it would actually be usually it may be limited to the CNII. In other words, it would be something that's that would be in terms of
it's for the critical national information infrastructure, the CNII, and also for those people that provide the service related to cybersecurity.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. I will move the spotlight to Mr. Motors, just to place a little bit of context, I suppose, to an understanding how the EO actually came to be and then the ideas behind it. So if it's okay for you to actually share some of your thoughts.
Yeah, I can give a little bit of information about how that came about. This was a collaborative effort from across the interagency, led by the National Security Council and others, to put this together. And it's especially the timing of it coming in May, in the wake of several major high-profile vulnerability disclosures, cybersecurity breaches, both federal and international. It's a great effort to really combat some of the supply chain risk, raising the bar for federal cybersecurity, pulling all of those efforts together and putting some aggressive timelines behind them really helped a lot in pushing these efforts forward and getting this done and getting this implemented. We're 90 days in. We've done. We've seen a tremendous amount of effort going towards putting together these plans, policies, and implementation, and we're very excited to see the impact of our efforts.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing. I think to put it in perspective, when it comes to supply chains, as mentioned by in the opening remarks, on the weakest link actually being the greatest vulnerability, and that's always a common saying when we actually look at cybersecurity, because anything that can actually open a window or any sort of vulnerability to your systems is actually going to be a part of the problem. So I'm actually going to turn the floor over to Sinatra for a Q&A. If it's okay, Sinatra, I actually invite you to take the Q&A session.
Yes, thank you so much, Farlina, for moderating the session. Good morning and good evening, I guess, to everyone here. My name is Sinatra. I'll be assisting Farlina with navigating the Q&A section of this webinar. I'm connected to you from a very cloudy Kuala Lumpur. I think Kuala Lumpur is having its own cold snap, if you may. So I hope everyone everywhere is doing all right, despite the Delta wave, pandemic, whatever. I hope you're doing all right. At this point, we only have 2 questions, and both apparently are directed to Ms. Azleyna. So I would encourage everyone here to please drop your questions in the Q&A box instead of the chat functions, just to make it easier for everyone here. So maybe the 2 questions that we have right now are quite big, if I may say so myself. So I guess we'll just break it down one by one, okay? So the first question to Ms. Azleyna is this. There have been a few changes in Malaysia's government in the past 3 years. In fact, we only had a new prime minister sworn in a few days ago. Has this in any way affected the consistent implementation of cyber strategies? Is there enough working level efforts to ensure cybersecurity policies and programs carry on? Over to you, Ms. Azleyna.
Okay, all right. So thank you for the questions. We try as best as we could actually to follow the plan that has been set up. Okay, the responsibility that has been given to us basically as the agency. So the most important thing is actually to make the stakeholders, or even soon to be stakeholders, understand the requirements and also understand the path that we need to take and the destination that we want to reach. We will continue to do the engagement with all the stakeholders as well as the other policymakers basically. On the working levels, sometimes resources will always become one of the issue in most of the country, not only Malaysia. But we need to be more creative in ensuring that the cybersecurity policy and also whatever program, strategy, work plan that has been put in place can still be carried out actually. For us in general, as much as possible, we will not use the issue of resources as a hindrance for not doing nothing actually. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for that response, Ms. Azleyna. Another question just popped up, and yet another one for Ms. Azleyna, but let's give her some time to take a breath. I just got a WhatsApp question to Mr. Mortis actually. It's actually about, you mentioned in the beginning that the US, or is it CISA, is on track to achieving all of the deliverables laid out in the EO. So at this point, do you think the EO can be a good model that can be replicated by other countries? Obviously, we're trying to emulate a discussion here. So if Ms. Azleyna even has any comments or any opinions on the recently announced EO by the US, by all means, please share your thoughts with us. So over to you, Mr. Mortis.
So that's a great question. Could this executive order be a model more broadly to impact change? I think it certainly can. I think that the executive order was written for a very specific moment in time and a very specific overall cybersecurity posture at the U.S. federal government, and deals with a lot of things that are based on how the federal government does cybersecurity, or the way federal contracting, the way that we. So not everything may be 100% applicable, but influencing change in a very fast-paced environment, putting those timelines as short as they were. I mean, I think myself, since we're only 90 days in, I hope that the long-term legacy of these efforts will, speak very positively of our efforts. But
had some difficulties there, but I guess we get some of the points that Mr. Motors tried to convey. Ms. Azleyna, do you have some thoughts on the EO itself that you'd like to share? Sorry, Ms. Azleyna, you're muted. Sorry.
Okay, I think one of the things that I also would like to ask Mr. Motors is actually under section number 4 related to the use of software for critical services actually, because I would very much interested on how they govern in terms of the software to be used, because you know when we wanted to use certain software in our business environment or our organization, that will depend on what are the things that we want to achieve during our operation. By having this bill, actually, how do they make sure that the governance of the software used for critical systems are being made, and also how they do some sort of adherence checking and so on. Yeah. So it's more like questions actually.
And all good questions. The software piece in the executive orders is really critical and really aims to get at identifying software that either runs with elevated privileges or there's a series of factors. I'm going to go ahead and post in the chat here for panelists and attendees a link to the page on NIST.gov that has the definition of critical software. There's a lot of great material here explaining how they deliberated this process and how they put together the definition and how they identify the categories as well. It's certainly an interesting question to ask because there's so much in a lot of IT environments that run on elevated privileges or have some trust, or really it seems that operating at a point where a lot of softwares that require additional security considerations to be put in place around them can in fact have that security in place. So one of the great byproducts of making all of this public is that the impact here goes beyond just the federal government, and hopefully can influence the term that I believe is being used by now by CISA is cyber poor, organizations that may not have a ton of resources to donate to put towards cybersecurity, and may not have expertise on staff who can make a lot of these decisions. Providing these frameworks are really helpful in helping organizations that have technical debt or are trying to make smart business decisions. Providing the way that we look at it hopefully can help some organizations out there, particularly when it comes to the security procedures that need to be put in place around critical software as well, which I don't believe those have been publicized yet. They have security measures for EO. They can also be website. I'm going to go ahead and drop those in chat as well. But ultimately, again, anytime we can release these best practices out to the community, one, the feedback from the community makes them stronger documents, and two, hopefully they can be used to help organizations as they combat their own data categorization and cloud migrations and other efforts.
I'd like to remind to everyone again that we actually have around 16 to 16 minutes left of conversation. Again, we're still waiting for more questions to drop in the Q&A box. So by all means, please feel free to drop your question there. I actually know some cybersecurity experts in the list of the attendees. So you know yourself, if you have questions, please don't be shy and just drop your questions in the Q&A box. Maybe we'll turn the spotlight back to Ms. Azleyna for now. A question from Thomas Daniel. Can you tell us more on how different Malaysian agencies or stakeholders approach the concepts of cyber stability and security? Is there a workable convergence, or is cooperation hobbled by difficulties as different agencies or stakeholders have different interests and understanding on cyber stability and security?
Okay, thank you for the question. Yeah, the issue is already there. That means different agencies or stakeholders have their very own different interests and also understanding on how they want to approach cyber stability or even cyber security. So again, just to reiterate that when we first wanted to come up with a strategy, we did an engagement with everybody. We want them to be part of the strategy, not being left alone and something like that. So the strategy itself is actually based on public-private partnership model, PPP, basically, because we also believe that the most effective way to implement the strategy, the national strategy, is actually to address and also to tackle cybersecurity issues is also through a together effort at the domestic level using the PPP model. We don't want to reinvent the same wheel that has been carried out by other agencies or stakeholders in relation to cybersecurity. We also welcome them to assist us to ensure the successful implementation of the strategy, so that we can maximize all the resources, the resources, the people, the experts, the knowledge, and so on, basically. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Azleyna. Mr. Mortis actually got another WhatsApp question for you. This time, it's actually about the EO itself, Section 2 specifically. So to Mr. Mortis, what is the mindset behind Section 2, removing barriers to sharing threat information? Were there different ways of understanding threats in the public-private sector? Sorry, Mr. Mortis, you're muted. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So that's a great question. Section 2 really gets at supply chain risk and working more closely with federal contractors to be able to share information in the aftermath of a breach or an incident. I think the past several months have really opened a lot of people's eyes to the risks supply chain and the different ways that adversaries can leverage those interconnections from managed service providers, from other organizations to be able to do that. What the clauses that are recommended as part of Section 2 really get at, Section 2GI covers the information sharing, tasking CISA with producing contract clauses that would ease barriers on information sharing in the event of a report, in the event of an incident, to allow us that visibility to determine whether or not there's a broader security risk that would pose a risk to federal networks. Section 2G3 tasks CISA to look at how we're sharing that information with the interagency to make sure that our colleagues at cyber centers, at other federal cybersecurity organizations have the information that they need in order to properly address their own cybersecurity may be posed as a result. But really the main goal with Section 2 is to raise the baseline cybersecurity posture, help implement some baseline cyber hygiene best practices, and remove any barriers to sharing information with the federal government from a contractual standpoint.
Thank you, Mr. Mortis. I also would like to invite you, if you have any questions to Ms. Azleyna on anything spanning from NACSA itself or Malaysia's national strategy, by all means, please ask directly to Ms. Azleyna. I see Prof. Stephen Leong actually raised his hand. Let me see, where are you, Mr. Prof? Prof, can you hear me? Can you talk now? You're muted, Prof. Prof. Stephen Leong. Hello, Prof. Stephen. Okay, I guess we're still waiting for Prof. Stephen Leong to unmute himself. While waiting, we'll ask Ms. Azleyna perhaps this last question in the Q&A box. Is there an existing bill posted in the Parliament on the cybersecurity, or is it only in the process of being made? I guess you partially addressed this question earlier in your presentation about the feasibility studies, if I'm not mistaken. But by all means, Ms. Azleyna.
Yes, in terms of is there an existing bill in the parliament? As far as I know, there is none at the moment. So basically, we understand and everybody knows that Malaysia already have certain existing laws for cybercrime and also cybersecurity issues in Malaysia, such as we have the CPC, Criminal Procedure Code, we have the Penal Code, we have the Copyright, Communication and Multimedia Act, and also the Financial Services Act, to name few. But as technology evolve at a rapid pace, Malaysia also recognized that there are areas in the law that which needs to be reviewed to accommodate these new technologies and also the threats that comes together actually, especially in the cybersecurity domain. So the first order of the pillar number 2 in the MCSS is actually we want to study and review all the existing laws and regulation that has been used to deal with cybercrime and also cybersecurity issues. And then findings of all of these effort actually will not only pave the way for us to appropriately update the existing legislation or laws, but also help us to introduce a new law in the cybersecurity if deemed necessary. So that is why we call it as a feasibility studies, basically. All right.
Prof. Stephen Leong has fortunately unmuted himself, but before that, I would like to again remind the participants, if there's any section in the EO that are still unclear to you, by all means, please ask Mr. Harry Mortis directly in the Q&A. You can still do that. We still have 8 minutes left of our conversation here. So I'll turn the spotlight to Prof. Stephen Leong. Prof, can you speak now?
Yes. Can
Hi,
you hear
Prof.
me?
How are you? Yes, loud and clear. How are you, Prof?
Pretty good.
Yeah. Please address your question.
I have a very layman's question.
Yes,
Cybersecurity, as we all know, so crucial. I'm just curious to find out, is there an international organization like UN or OECD that keeps an eye on global efforts by each country for advancement of cybersecurity? Is there a global ranking for this? And if there is, I wonder who are the top 5 or top 10? Thank you.
Thank you, Prof, for your question. I guess I'll direct that question both to Mr. Mortis and Ms. Azleyna. Maybe we'll start with Mr. Mortis, if you have any comments or thoughts to that question.
So that is an interesting question. A global governance model for cybersecurity is interesting, but I'll defer to my other colleagues on the panel for comment on that subject.
All right, Ms. Azleyna, perhaps.
Okay, all right, sorry. Thank you, Professor, for the questions. One of the platform or medium that I can think of at the moment is actually the Global Cybersecurity Index, or the GCI by ITU, which is actually a trusted reference that measures the commitment of each country in the world related to cybersecurity at a global level, basically. So this is where we've been measured to if I'm not mistaken, about 5 elements under GCI in terms of our readiness, in terms of the implementation, the effectiveness of the program that we do in our country, strategy related to cybersecurity, and also how they will give us the ranking lah, basically. Let's say, for example, for last year, we were ranked as number 5. Before that is number 8. So those are the things that we can use actually to measure ourselves, a trusted reference, basically.
Thank you, Ms. Azleyna. There is a question to Mr. Mortis, and I think I'll take this question last for one last time, because we only have 5 minutes left, and I'd like Mr. Mortis to answer this question before we turn over to both role players to deliver their concluding remarks. So the question to Mr. Mortis is, cybersecurity is trade-offs to technology. I would like to listen, how does the US manage cyber risks where the need to understand the technicality is crucial for the decision maker to make an effective decision? How does the CISA translate the technical issue for the decision maker to make informed decisions? Over to you, Mr. Mortis.
So this is a great question and a difficult one to answer. Because it's industry-wide in cybersecurity. The same, it's a very similar issue for private corporations who are informing, CEO officials on technical matters and things like this. The ability to take highly technical information and convey it accurately and succinctly to a non-technical audience is one of the best skills you can have as a cybersecurity professional, in my opinion. It is in very high demand, but given that problem is across the entire industry, I can at least say from my standpoint, I used to work with a team that did a lot of cybersecurity assessments, penetration testing, and things like that. And the ability in the conclusion of these assessments to be able to information in an effective and thorough manner, while being able to relay the information at a technical level that got the point across, but also was digestible and actionable on behalf of the stakeholder, was an absolutely key skill. And that skill, again, across the cybersecurity industry, it exists everywhere. Yeah, I apologize for not getting more into the heart of the matter. Yeah, it's certainly a trade-off that requires a delicate balance and folks who are skilled and talented in being able to translate the technical into the non-technical.
I guess we in Malaysia also face the same difficulties of translating technical information into language that is comprehensible to decision makers. So I guess the sentiment is shared by us in Malaysia. So we've almost reached the end of our discussion with only 2 minutes left. So I will invite both speakers to deliver their closing remarks, maybe 1 minute each. We'll start with Ms. Azleyna.
Thank you. So I don't have much to say anymore, but it is hope that we hope that all the late action plans, strategy, and also program via the MCSS, via our public and private partnership model to implement the program in MCSS, and also the successful implementation of all the strategies, action plan, and all will be successful to ensure we were able to build a secure, trusted, and also resilient cyberspace of Malaysia. So again, I want to reiterate that it is a whole nation approach, basically. Do approach us if you have ideas, or if you have a beneficial program that you want to put forward to be able for us to carry out under the Malaysia cybersecurity strategy, basically. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Azleyna. Mr. Mortis, your final closing remark.
Yeah, I will be very brief. Once again, I just want to thank the organizers for putting this together, for inviting me to come talk about the EO. It's been a privilege to support this effort in improving the nation's cybersecurity, and the resources that we provide. Hopefully, they're of broader use. The documentation coming out of NIST, the forthcoming CISA documentation. Hopefully, that will help start continue ongoing conversations in the private sector and internationally of how we can all address this this problem of cybersecurity together. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Cortez, and thank you both speakers and also our participants for not only listening but also asking questions in this very refreshing webinar. I certainly learned a lot from this webinar, and I hope you did too. And we hope to invite both Ms. Azleyna and Mr. Mortis again in our future events, perhaps maybe even physical events, hopefully, after everyone got vaccinated and safe to travel again. So that's it from me. I'll pass the floor over back to Ms. Farlina.
Thank you so much, Sinatra, Ms. Azleyna, and also Mr. Mortis for actually tackling all the questions. And also the question, I believe that always the difficulty when we are actually looking at cybersecurity issues is that there has to be actually that match between the technical expertise and then actually translating that somehow into policy, and then from policy to things like legislation and to action plans. And this actually has to occur, as Ms. Azleyna mentioned, across the whole government. I think certain things that's always very, very interesting, and I believe that we probably didn't tackle as heavily as I suppose the private sector participation that would actually occur in this type of process, which would be interesting considering we're looking at the US. There's a lot of big tech that's actually there, and then to actually understand how that actually works when we're actually looking at even security at places like Malaysia. There's so much room to actually converse on all these things. But I would actually love to give everybody an applause for just being able to give us a healthy discussion on the policies that's actually in place. If it's okay, I'm actually going to close the forum and thank our speakers as well as the US Embassy in Kuala Lumpur very much for putting this together, as well as to thank the team in ISIS Malaysia for actually making this happen. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. We hope you actually have a good evening as well as a good day.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.